From somewhere on the East Coast near the Atlantic Ocean, it's the Nolan Carr Night Show starring Nolan Carr and his guest this week for episode 150, actor Sy Richardson. And now, here he is. Here's Nolan. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another a very exciting edition here on the Nolan Carr Night Show here on this podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed episodes like this one, because who the heck wouldn't, down the road when this becomes really massive, more than it already is, do us a favor by subscribing on YouTube, following us on the audio platforms, clicking that thumbs up, like button, share all that fun jazz so you can help continue to grow the podcast. Nevertheless, onto the real pomp and circumstance and the real nitty gritty of this time, because here today with you, a great guest. From the streets of Chicago to the glitzy streets of Tinseltown by way through the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Sy Richardson has been at the forefront of storytelling with the likes of Harry Dean Stanton, Charles Bronson, Emilio Estevez, Rowdy Piper, Dennis Hopper, Robert Duvall, and Sean Penn, just to name a few. Whether it be as a fairy godmother, a repo man, or anything in between, we are more than lucky enough to share this world with him. It's my pleasure to have Mr. Richardson on the program this week as our guest for episode 150. Sy, how's it going today?
Going good, going real good. How's it going with you?
As we were saying before we got going here, it's getting a little cold and dark here on the East Coast, but besides that, we're here, we're alive, we're rock and roll, and I'm talking to Sy Richardson, so what's worse than that?
That's a good thing, especially when I'm in California.
Exactly, you got nothing to worry about. There's so much I want to talk to you about today, but I want to first start, like I try to do with everybody, about the early beginnings of their story and their youth and growing before they hit quote unquote fame. And what I find interesting is that although you got into the movie business many years later in your early 30s when you came to California, I think your first hit at the world of the arts and entertaining was at the young age of 4 years old in your father's church, the Norfolk Gospel Church, screaming and crying because you want to join in and singing. At that early part in your life, and obviously at 4 years old, you're not really thinking of it, oh, I want to be a movie star, I want to be an actor. But looking back on, do you think that moment and other moments like that at 4 years old where you're screaming and crying to want to be part of it is your foray into saying, hey, I may want to be in the arts?
I've wanted been since I was 4 years old. But then again, by the time I reached 10, I was singing in the choir and in school. And then when I hit 16, I was recording with the doo-wop group. We had
Yeah.
one TV show. So all my life, I just wanted to be an entertainer. Acting was a late thing to hit me. I got a full scholarship. Let me do it this way. It's better. I drove a city bus from 4 to 7. I went to school, college from 10 to 3. I went back to work at 5 to 8. And on the weekends, I sung at the night at a nightclub somewhere in Chicago. So I've always wanted to be an entertainer, but not an actor. This acting
Yeah.
thing didn't start until I got in college. Yeah.
What was it about music beyond just listening to it that you wanted to jump into it that was the precursor for other forms of entertainment?
Because by my father having a singing group, they were rehearsing at least 3 times a week, and I was always around them, you know. And so that had a lot to do with it. Plus, my average friend, their father was also in a singing group, the
Sure.
Soul Stirreds, and all of these guys, and Sam Cooke, and I knew all these guys. So that had a lot to do with it. I'm around them
Yeah.
doing, yeah, let's see.
Was music something that you wanted to pursue full time, or was it one of those things where it's like it's not something that's super attainable in that degree and it was more for fun?
Oh, I wanted to do it full time because that's why I worked, drove the city bus to make a living. But I was singing, and I started singing in nightclubs at 16 years old. And my
Yeah.
mother would have to come to the nightclub and sit there with us from 9 o'clock until 3 in the morning. Then she got to be at work at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, see. So I always wanted to sing, and I've always sung someplace. See.
Sure.
If it wasn't at church, it was on the street corners. People talk about doo-woppers and singing by lampposts. Well, we actually did that. On the north side of Chicago, we would stand underneath a lamppost and do our doo-wops. Yeah.
You just mentioned there your mother coming to the nightclub and being there watching with you from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. and then of course working only a few hours after that when you left. I feel as though that's to some extent supportive because most parents and most people wouldn't stay out that long and cheer on people, never mind working the next morning a few hours later. How supportive were your parents of your push and your love and interest in wanting to make it professionally as a singer?
My father was against the idea because he felt like me and Sam Cooke, we were taking gospel songs and adding rhythm and blues links to
Okay,
it, and he didn't like that, see. But my mother was one of those ladies who says, "Try it. If it works,
sure.
great. If it doesn't work, great. But get it out your head." That was the way she looked at it.
When eventually you move out west, or I shouldn't say west, well, yeah, I guess to an extent west, but more to the Midwest to Colorado, where you'd go to community college, you get a full ride, you get a few offers of other schools, UC Boulder's where you end up going, and where you sort of get your intro into acting. You are part, or you're the editor of the first black newspaper or school newspaper. So we're in a world nowadays where a lot of kids, if they want to be actors, they do it in high school, they do it right after in some sort of drama school or college. When you're starting a little later than that, how much drive does that give you to make it compared to others early on in their career?
Well, I wasn't doing it to be an actor.
Yeah.
I was doing it because they needed me. For instance, they would get ready to do their first black play, and they needed a 65-year-old black guy. Well, the closest one to that was me, and I was 32. So that's how I ended up acting. So I did that one. Then there was a black theater company in Denver, and so they needed help. So I did that one. It was just something to do.
There's a guy who spoke to last week. His name is Russ Banham. He's now a successful writer, and he's wrote corporate history books and about Ford and Boeing and Harvard Business School and so forth. But before he got doing that for the last several decades, he was in a movie with Bill Murray called Meatballs, and he had a pretty big starring role in the film. However, after a sitcom with Norman Lear. It didn't do well, and his acting prowess, sort of, or prowess abilities and opportunities fizzled out, and he left the field. And what I find interesting about your story, and this might be jumping around a bit, is that here you come to California after going to school in Colorado. You partake in a student film at UCLA. You've been there for 30 days. You have no money to your name. You're staying at a friend's house, and you get your first big gig, second lead in a feature film. If starting acting in your early 30s didn't set a fire under your stomach, how much did that aspect coming to California, 30 days without anything, set a fire in your belly to really succeed?
But see, coming to California was a little different. Uh, I was I was in Boulder, Colorado earlier, and I went to Golden, Colorado to do vaudeville shows. So I did vaudeville shows for a year and a half. And one of the shows we did was in St. Louis, Missouri on the Goldenrod Showboat. So when it finished, we had to make a decision whether we're going back to Golden, Colorado. Was I going back to Chicago? What was I going to do? And when I say we, I'm talking about the cast. And we're all laughing, trying to figure out where we are going. I told them I don't know. And so that morning we went to church. It was a lady named Pastor Shirley Caesar. She prayed for us. And I put all my bags and stuff in my car and I'm ready to leave. And it started to snow. And I said, I'm going to California. And everyone must start laughing because they know how I feel about being out of the snow and out of the cold. So I'm going to California. And that's how I came to California. So I didn't come to California to be a star. I just came to California and figured I just make a living as an actor. I didn't care if it was one line, no lines, or 100 lines. It didn't matter, just as long as I can make a living like I made a living driving the city bus. That was my goal.
Well, you certainly met your goal and then some because early in your career and early in anyone's career, I'm guessing that you're not having the opportunity to say, "Oh, I wanted to this part's okay. I'm going to take this one. I'm going to take that one." You're sort of saying, what can I do to at least float by and make it at the beginning before there's some sort of wiggle room. And at the beginning of your career, 1977, you're in a little film called Cinderella, and there's an experience you shared on another interview a few years ago about getting to the set, getting in an elevator, and seeing something that you were not used to or expecting ever. For you as a new actor, someone who hadn't maybe experienced something like that ever in their life, how much did that make you jump back and think about, is this really what I want? Or was that something where it's a learning experience?
Well, see, I looked at it like this. As a youngster, well, when I came out of high school, I went to the Navy. And in the Navy, I had two goals. One was to save the United States of America from the communists. Two was to get laid by a girl in every port. When you're 18 years old, what more can you expect?
Yeah, that's like a
So,
Ricky Nelson song.
yeah. So when I saw these girls naked uh, on the elevator, I immediately put my eyes from their shoulder up. I didn't look down. And I took that as a test. Was I coming to California to work as an actor? Was I coming in California to get laid? And I didn't know, and I didn't even know what a porn film was. How ignorant I was. Yeah, see, so that's how I looked at it. I didn't pay any attention to them because it wasn't the reason why I was there. You know,
Sure.
I had $45 to my name, no place really to stay. My car had a hole in the tire where I could take my finger and rub the inner tube.
Uh,
So, I needed money. I needed a
yeah.
job. I didn't need women.
In other interviews you've done, you've talked about, and props to you especially for you being proud in yourself of being a well-known character actor and some of the element characters you've played. And a few years after Cinderella, you starred in a movie called Nocturne, Granddaughter of the Vampire, and in that film by Harry Hurwitz was the legendary, probably the most famous character actor of all time was John Carradine, and of course, Brother Theodore was in that film with the characters and the character actor that you became later in your career, working with somebody like John Carradine at that point in his career, what was that like in terms of influence, but also inspiration that you carried with you throughout the rest of your career?
Yeah, I had gotten a teacher, and one of the teachers told me, said that no character actor, no star is important. What's important is the character that you're doing. You are not important as an actor. It's the character. And that's how I looked at it because I figured here's a guy that was a director for my favorite show of all times as a little boy called Howdy Doody. And and so I believe what he said. So I paid attention, and I didn't deal with the fact that these were stars, these were character actors around me. All I dealt with was reading a script, telling this story, using this guy the way I needed to make this story works because that's my job. It's interesting. I worked with a guy named John Wayne, and you heard of him,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so.
And John Wayne said something very interesting, and it helped. He says, I was in this scene, and we were chasing the bandits, and we reached a point where there was a fork in the road. He said, now, we didn't know whether to go left or right at the fork. He said, and a guy stood up, a miner stood up, and he pointed to the right. So we went to the right. We got to the right, we caught the bandits. He says, I'm telling you this to let you know that everyone in the film is important because we're all there for one purpose, to
Sure.
help tell the story. You know, so that alone helped me to keep my head straight. I never thought about being a star. I never thought about taking my character trying to top it above other characters in the film. It was telling my story as this character.
In the 80s, there's a lot of looking back on it, and we can name several of them movies that came out during that period that have held the test of time. And doing my research on you and doing research on a little film you were part of, it was known as probably one of, if not the greatest film that came out in 1984, and it was a film called Repo Man. You may remember that project that you were a part of. And for you, a lot of those scenes in there, you're working with Emilio Estevez, of course, Carradine stands in that. Tell me how you got attached to a film like that in your career.
I was told that I should never do background work because if I do background work, casting directors will not call me in for principal parts because I'm considered a background actor. Well, this young lady, she called me and she said she needed a background actor, and she wanted someone from Chicago that have that Midwestern sound, and she forgot to cast it and asked me if I would come and do it. Name was Vicky, and I thought about it and I said sure, and it was a UCLA film, student film. So I went in to do the student film, and when I got there, uh, the guy who had the principal part didn't show up. And so she asked me if I would learn the lines and do it. And so I said, yeah, yeah, I'll do it. And there were two students sitting there watching the shoot. And I did it. And I guess about 3, 4 months later, I get a phone call. And there's a guy named Alex Cox called me. And he wanted me to do a film with him. Uh, and it was called Repo Man. And that's how I ended up getting the film. But actually, I ended up doing 6 or 5 films for Alex and 3 films for Charles Burnett. These were the two students sitting there watching this shoot. See, so if I hadn't have gone in to do this
Yeah.
background job, I'd have never got those other 9 jobs.
Well, what does that say then about Alex? Well, the situation of Alex, the director, wanting to work with you that many times, but also you seeming to be attracted to the type of performance he does as a director.
I looked at him like I looked at myself. He was here for one purpose, to tell a good story. I'm here for one purpose, to tell a good story. It had nothing about him being, quote, superstar as a director.
Sure.
That stuff didn't come up. All came up is who, what, when, where, why, and how you're dealing with this character, this story. And so I was in good shape. Same way with Charles Burnett. They both had that same feel. This is what we're here to do, is to tell the story. Yeah.
In Repo Man, that's one of Emilio Estevez's first performances in terms of his professional career. We know who his siblings are and his father, of course. Learning from John Wayne in that film you were with, what was it like to sort of maybe reverse roles where you're sort of helping out Emilio Estevez during that film early on in his career?
He didn't need any help because he had his father who had walked him through,
Yeah.
and his brother, Charlie Sheen. So he didn't need any help. He just needed us to do our job, and that's what we did. Yeah.
Well, it's a great film, and there's so many different elements to it that make it unique. For me, at least, when I was watching it the other night, I got elements of Mad Max. The kids with the spiky hair and the grunge outfits, and then you have Harry Dean Stanton's character dressing up as a businessman. They're repoing cars, and there's your character. And as an actor, what's it like then working with Emilio? Because, as I said, you had a lot of scenes with him in the movie.
See, I didn't know who Emilio was. I didn't meet Emilio until I got on the set. And I didn't know who his father was or his brother was
Hmm.
until we were halfway through with the film. So to me, he was just an actor, just like me. We're working together as a team.
That movie, as I said, holds a lot of weight looking back on it in a lot of retrospects. Because years down the road, films, if they don't do well, they may become cult classics down the road, and people love them and give the praise they deserved early on when that film first came out. Being that you're known for that role in Repo Man, what does it mean to you then, all these years later, that that film still holds value, if not more value now than it did when it first came out?
I saw, as it is now, that I did something that helped other people with their life, their lifestyle, the changes they made. As a matter of fact, I was in a restaurant one day eating, and this family came in. They were like 4 or 5 tables down from me. I'm sitting there eating and talking to my friends, and suddenly these 6 people jumped up, ran over to to my table, and surrounded me and and was telling me and was thanking me for the job I did. They liked it, the information they got and so forth and so on. And I'm in awe, I'm said thank you. I didn't know what to say because I never looked at it that people would come to
Sure.
me. I'm the guy in the background, even though I have lines, I still consider myself not one of the leads, not one of the leads in the film.
Well, and when I look at the film, even right now, thinking about it, it's not necessarily even stealing, repoing cars, but it's more of Emilio Estevez's character sort of has a mundane life. His parents aren't really paying attention to him. They seem like they're taken away from life mentally and physically, and he finds a group of people that are his people, and he's able to sort of succeed very well in that field and find these people who are crutches for him to succeed in life. Do you see any parallels within your life of finding a path that you were able to succeed in and soar pretty high with?
You know, I looked at that like the majority of the guys that I went to school with. We were led by our parents. Like my mother, she wanted me to be in a business. She wanted me to be a manager of this company she works for. And I looked at all of us, our parents, our sisters and brothers, they all had other ideas of how they wanted us to live our life. And that's the way I looked at Repo Man, is that uh, this guy, he wasn't aware of not too many things that he's doing in his life, but he found something that worked for him. And that's what's important, I find that today. I find that now. I taught an acting class for 10 years in Hollywood. And the people that got on my nerves that I had to have long conversation with was the parents.
Sure.
Yeah, because the parents, they want their children to be stars. And I kept trying to get them, they have to first be actors, see. And that's the way I looked at Repo Man.
At the end of the 80s and into the early 90s, I like to think, maybe into the mid 90s, those certain years belonged, in my opinion, to a great extent to a certain actress named Sharon Stone, who you worked with in Cold Steel at the end of the 80s, maybe 88, 89. She was very hot around that time. She worked with Michael Douglas. She worked eventually then with Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro in Casino. You'd also worked with Robert Duvall in Colors in 1990 as well. That experience at that point in the late 80s, early 90s, working with two people who had significance in the acting world. What were those two films like?
It was a lot of fun. I'm laughing because Robert Duvall, they all had to come to work early because I had another film I was doing. And so they had to change the schedule. So they changed the schedule and came a week early so I could do my scenes and then go on to my other film. So we get there, and the first scene, we're in the car. And I get in the back seat of the car. We do the scene. And once it was finished, Robert Duvall looked back at me and he looked up and he says, he can act. I started laughing. And he was satisfied. He was
Yeah.
satisfied that they moved it up a week so I could be in it, see. Yeah, it was funny, yeah. But
Well,
he's a cool guy.
he's a guy, sorry, he's a guy who's been really supportive of the Western genre for many, many, many years, and he was inducted into maybe like the Oklahoma State Hall of Fame or whatever for the Westerns. And he mentioned, I forget what he said, certain places have this type of film, and but the United States has the Western film. You ended up writing a script for a Western film in the 90s, which then ended up getting produced. How much of that did you respect in him for being a fan of the Westerns, a supporter? Because then you also were then writing a script for a Western film as well.
That's part of the reason why I ended up writing this script.
Okay.
Because I was sitting around talking to some of the young guys and I was telling them about my grandfather who lived to be 105 and who was a cowboy and was in the Spanish American War and the different things that he did, And someone says, "Well, why don't you write a script about him?" And Robert Duvall looked at me and put that little smile on his face, waiting to hear what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And I said, I think about it, and that was it. But that's how I decided to take the time to write it.
One of the main things, if not the main thing I wanted to talk about with you today was a film you did in 1989 with a little known actor named Charles Bronson. You might have heard of him. You may not know him. He in a movie called Kinjite,
Kinjite.
Forbidden Subjects. Interesting film. It's a film. Well, I watched it. It's a film that deals with a heavy topic of kidnapping and other sketchy stuff. Going into it, when did you learn of what the film was about, and how did you react to that moment of learning the overall plot of it?
What I basically do is I read the script first, and then I go back and break down my character in the script. Those are the first two things I do. Then after that, I deal with the other ones that I may talk to and see, try to get a good sense of everyone there. Uh, Kinjite was how you put it. It was the film that everyone has something they really. This was a film that I really wanted to do. Why? Because Charles Bronson was in it, and
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Charles Bronson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's how that came about. But something else interesting about that too. We were on the balcony looking down, and there was at least 30, 40 people. Was as soon as an actor walked off, they'd run and ask them for the autograph and so forth and so on. So uh, I was watching, and Charles Bronson walked over to me, and he says, "Sy," I said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't go down there. Wait until they leave." I said, why? He says, because the reason why they want your autograph so they can take it to an autograph festival and sell it.
Yeah.
He says, don't let them sell your name. I said, okay, I didn't go. Yeah. So, I remember that really clearly because I didn't expect him to come over and say anything
Sure.
to me. I'm just an actor trying to make a living and get my career stronger, but he cared about me and what I was doing. Yeah.
Speaking of that, and that sort of leads me to my question. He's got a interesting personality, a serious man, it seems like. He's done interviews where people have asked him about that and how he handles that, and how he seems sort of like a rough person. You had a few scenes with him, which I'll talk about in a moment. That film was near the end of his motion picture career. He did a few TV films later on before he passed away and sort of retired beforehand. Did you sense anything different about him after being a fan to then seeing him at that point in his career near the end?
I saw that he was more humble than you
Okay,
see him on screen. Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed. And things like that help me too also, because then I look at him and see where he's gone with his career and who he was. Then there was no harm in me being humble, you know.
sure.
Yeah, and that's how I looked at it.
You had two big action sequences with Charles Bronson's character in the film. One is you get punched in the face. I'm trying to think of where it was in the movie. And then, of course, the classic one is when you and Charles Bronson's character's partner hang you over the ledge of the hotel balcony and drop you into the pool to your death. What's it like from an action sequence perspective, sharing that aspect with someone like Charles Bronson?
I knew nothing would go wrong. You know, I knew nothing would go wrong because he's the man. He knows exactly
Yeah,
what he's doing, how to do it, and when to do it. See. Um, my biggest question was, will I be able to fall down there correctly?
sure.
Well, can I keep the fear away, and deal with it? See.
I know that Repo Man holds a close spot to your heart and your performance and where it holds in society. I know Posse holds a close spot in your heart as well, seeing as the story that you wrote was based on your grandfather and the life he lived. Is there a movie that you were a part of that doesn't get enough recognition that you believe is some of your best work that means a lot to you?
Hmm. Wow, that's a good question. I'd have to say Cinderella
Okay,
because I've never done a film before. Uh, I had problems with the other gender because where I come from in Chicago, it was a different world, you
sure.
know. Uh-huh. And so I had to do these things that I fought against as a youngster, you know. I had to be this character, like the character that lived across the street from me, who was constantly coming out talking about, "I'm gonna turn you into a girl," all kind of crazy stuff. See? So now I've got to turn around and play a character like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say Cinderella, and it worked out much better. Yeah, so.
Well, I'd like to think after that, your career definitely had some entertaining moments for us fans. Mentioning that role and taking what you had in life growing up and making sure that role was somewhat beneficial off of that experience. Is there a role that you would like to play that you haven't, or that you wish you could have played earlier in your career that you haven't?
No, but there is a TV show I would love to been in at least one time. And and that was Law and Order
Uh,
SVU. And right now I still watch the show. I got at least 30 of them on there now that I watch them over and over again. I just love that show, but I've never had a chance to work it.
Before we leave here today, Cyan, again, thank you for doing this. I want to end on a little segment called the One Word Challenge. And what entails with this is I'll throw out a few names of people, places, or things that have some connection to you, and you have to do your best to say a word or two that comes to mind when you hear it.
Okay.
First one, Chicago, Illinois.
Cold, uh a learning experience.
Hollywood, California.
Dream World. It
Success.
was, as a matter of fact, I'll add this right quick. I was in eighth grade. I was in my last year of high school, and it was snowing. And I was looking out the window, and the teacher says, "Boy, what are you daydreaming about?" I looked at her and said, "Moving to California." And everybody burst out and started laughing. This is my dream place. I just love it here. Yeah.
Success.
Having a job, having a place to stay, uh, being married, and having a church home.
Storytelling.
I love telling stories. I've been telling stories ever since I was a kid. My parents call them lies, but either way, it was still, I make up stories.
Alex Cox.
Great guy, really great guy.
And last but certainly never least in this cosmic universe we all live in called Earth, Sy Richardson.
I consider myself a Christian who had an opportunity to do what it is I loved. Yeah.
Well, I like to think you're a pretty good dude as well with what you've been able to achieve in your life because it's certainly a story to be told. Well, Mr. Richardson, I'd like to say again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It was a great thrill for me as a fan of Charles Bronson to watch a film of his that you were in, and specifically for this show and talk about your life was definitely a treat. So thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me. I had a good time.
If you want more news and updates regarding the podcast, do us a favor by subscribing on YouTube, following us on the audio platforms, clicking a thumbs up, like button, share button so you can help continue to grow the show to the highest of highs. And in the words of Johnny Carson, the dean of talk shows, certainly like this one, I bid you all a heartfelt good night. Till next time, take care.